kulanti wacan oo wanaagsan daawadayaasha qiimiga iyo qadarinta mudana idilhaantiiba meel kastoo joogtaanba waad ku mahadsantihiin daawashada barnaamijka daawadayaal maanta waxaan idiin haynaa barnaamij ku saabsan xubno kala duwan oo Soomaali ah oo ka kala yimid gobolada waddanka Canada uu ka kooban yahay ayaa ku kulmay magaalada Ottawa ee caasimadda waddanka Canada si ay jaa'iso iyo hadiyado u guddoonsiiyaan dowladda Turkiga iyo safaaradooda ku taala halkaasi iyo dowladda Canada. waxaan la soconaa in dowladda Turkigu ay si weyn u garab istaagtay xilligii Soomaalidu u baahnaayeen in la garab istaago. Ra'iisul Wasaaraha waddankaasi Turkiga Abdullah Erdogan iyo wafdi balaaran uu hogaaminaya ayaa booqasho ku tagay horay magaalada Muqdisho isagoo ay la socotay haweeneyda uu qabo iyo 2 carruur oo dhalay. isla docda kale mas'uuliyiin kale oo ka tirsan waddanka Turkiga ayaa isaga daba noqonayay magaalada Muqdisho si ay dhagaxa u dhigaan mashaariic halka dowladda Turkigu ugu talagashay inay si weyn ugu taageerto shacabka Soomaalida. deeq waxbarasho oo badan ayaa laga helay oo arday badan ayaa loo qaaday waddanka Turkiga. isla docda kale waddanka Canada ayaa qayb weyn ka qaatay xiriyaha qaxootiga ee ku yaala waddanka Kenya ee dad badan oo Soomaaliya u soo qaxeen halkaasi oo ay dowladda Canada ku guddoonsiisay lacag aad u fara badan hay'adaha iyagu gacanta ku haya xiriyaha qaxootiga sidii dadka Soomaalida loogu taakuleen lahaa. haddaba Soomaalida ka kala yimid gobolada kala duwan ee Alberta, Ontario, Quebec iyo meelo badan oo kala duwan ayaa si weyn halka hameenka isugu yimid waxayna dhammaantood ku faraxsanaayeen in ay siiyaan jaa'isad waddanka Turkiga iyo waddanka Canada. Axmed Dirir Xuseen oo isagoo ka tirsan ama madaxa ururka Canadian Somali Congress ayaa hameenka hadalka qaybinayay waxaana uu ka mid ahaa dadkii xafladda soo qabanqaabiyey daawasho wacan.
kusoo dhawaada caawa barnaamijkan waa barnaamij aan ugu talagalnay inaan ugu mahadcelino wadamada Soomaaliya waxa uu qabtay wadamadana aad bay tirada u badan yihiin laakiin waxaan rabnay bal qaar inaan ka bilowno hadhowdiina kuwa aan ka tagnay inaan maalin kale ka dhigno dadkana waa ogtihiin waqtigooda ma u saamaxayo inuu hal mar isku waqti wada noqdaan marka dowladda Canada iyo dowladda Turkey baa hadda waqtigan u saamaxday inay noo imaan karaan. So the event is primarily it's an appreciation event to thank the government of Canada and the government of Turkey. And without further ado, we'll start, the program is we'll start with a few comments from members of the Somali community in Ottawa, and that will be followed by a representative from Human Concern International, which played a key role in alleviating famine. The representative's comments will be followed by 2 members of parliament, and then the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of Turkey, and followed by the Minister from the Government of Canada representing the Government of Canada. And in all those speeches, once those speeches end, we will present each government representative with a certificate of appreciation and a gift from the Somali community, thanking them for their efforts for the Somali people and alleviating the famine. So I'll start by welcoming Fawzia Abdi to the microphone. Fawzia?
I'm honored to be here tonight to say a few words on behalf of the Hildo Association. I'd like to start by thanking the Government of Canada and the people for opening their hearts and helping Somalia with their generous and much needed humanitarian support. I cannot find the words to thank Canada. We, the nation of Somalia, are truly honored to have people donate over $35 million to towards the horrendous man-made famine. We thank you sincerely. The Hildo Association is a non-profit organization committed to serving the Somali community. We focus on the particular needs of the Somalian families here in Canada and in Somalia. We are committed to working with all levels of the government and service providers and multicultural organizations. In Ottawa, our objective is to fill gaps in the services and give support to the members of the Somali community by providing our youth with educational needs and help them find careers. In Somalia, our main objective is to increase levels of education and literacy. This will include rehabilitation of hospitals, prevention of futures and textbooks, and teacher capacity buildings. We focus on the youth education, vocational training for adults to develop their skills. We offer sewing, cooking, nutrition, education, tutoring, and youth groups. We organize activities for mothers and children. We run support groups for women focusing on wellness and run senior care. We also provide conflict resolutions, skills and culture of speech, of peace, I meant. This organization cannot be possible without the generous help of the Somali Canadian Congress that now we are proud of. We sincerely thank them and hope to cooperate with them in the future. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Faisal Jama, the Executive Director of the Somali Canadian Youth Center, which aims to help young people become upstanding citizens and away from a life of crime. Faisal?
Thank you. I'm thanking on behalf of the Somali Canadian Youth Center and the Somali community residing in Ottawa to the Canadian government and the Turkish government groups extend their hand to the Somalian assistance in order to make a safe place to live there. Thank you.
We'll next hear from MP Ted Opitz. Ted was recently elected to the Canadian House of Commons, our Canadian Parliament. He's the MP for Etobicoke Centre, and prior to that, he served in a senior advisory role to Minister Jason Kenney. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Ted Opitz to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That's very kind. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to, of course, recognize my colleague Brent Rathgeber from Edmonton, St. Albert, and he also has a very large constituency of Somalis in his riding. And thank you very much for your comments earlier about the Government of Canada. What I would like to talk to you about tonight, and Amit and I talked about this earlier, and we talked about this when we met in Etobicoke and at other times, is something a little closer to home as well. And there's a lot of social issues, and that's the engagement of the community as a whole. I mean, you do have issues on the international stage, which we're very, very cognizant of, and that obviously we've been working to address. And the Somali community itself has been working to address issues internationally as well, not just famine relief and drought, but also, in fact, I was reading a military magazine, and you know, the Somali community has been working on addressing piracy issues and things like that, and they've been very active at consultations and things in United Arab Emirates. So that's a very positive step to see that there are officials of the Somali community abroad organized and contributing to international conferences and things like that. So that's a very positive step forward. And I know you're all very focused on making sure that the country itself starts to rebuild itself, starts to rebuild democratic principles, and stabilizes a government. But in my riding, I have challenges that are a little more closer to home in terms of families, in terms of 37% dropout rate amongst Somali youth in schools, which we're very, very concerned about. There's issues of gang recruitment in Etobicoke Centre, which we're very, very concerned about, trying to find ways to alleviate that. And of course, there's the issue of even Al-Shabaab especially in Toronto, that is trying to recruit youth to radicalize and to bring back, and I'm very concerned about that. I should give you a little bit about my background too. I have been in the military for many, many years, and amongst working in private industry and then working for Jason Kenney, the immigration minister. So I've kind of got a rounded background on some of these things, and developing youth not only in the military, but it's kind of been a passion of mine, and I don't want to see kids go the wrong way, because as a young man at 16, I could have very easily gone left, and instead I went right because, you know, somebody said the right thing to me and gave me some opportunities and kind of pushed me in the right direction, and it would have been very easy to go the other way, you know. So I remember that from my own experience growing up, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to your families, and we can work on those sorts of things. So it's that kind of engagement that I really want to have from your community, in particular in Etobicoke Centre, so we can start to address some of those particular issues. But that's good, because I want to hear what people are talking about and things, and I really need you guys to sit down and talk to me. We've already had, I've done town halls in Etobicoke Centre. We've had this chat very, very clearly with families. Toronto District School Board has some really great programs, not just for the kids to get them back engaged, but also for the parents, because you have some unique challenges in that some of the parents are still very rooted in traditional culture of the old country, and some of the kids, and you tell me if I'm right, but I know my kids in Etobicoke Centre are calling themselves Somali Canadians version 1.5, and their words, not mine, you know. So, but that's a very interesting way of categorizing themselves, you know, and because they're kind of in betwixt and in between. You know, you have good, solid values and traditions that they respect and they revere, and they want to please their parents. But a lot of these kids are now transitioning, are very Canadian kids, you know, and they're into the video games, they're into the social media. They're into the engagement, and so we discussed a lot of these things at a town hall, and I did talk about some of the issues of gang recruitment and Al-Shabaab, and those things are steering away kids from that is very important, especially if they don't have, if they've dropped out of school and there's nothing else to engage them. So I think the formula here, or the part of the solution, is to try to find ways to engage the kids, to find them something to belong to contribute to maybe get back into school, because education will give you opportunities, networking skills, leadership skills, and engagement. So that's something that your kids, especially if you're located here in Ottawa, could endeavor to do. Get more involved in parliamentary internship programs or engagement, or just on a youth level, find out how your government works, not because we want to turn you into politicians, but because we want to find opportunities for your families to get into, for opportunities for your kids to get engaged with, and to start developing some of those networking and leadership skills. So I'm going to leave it there for now, Ahmed, because I don't want to go on and on and on ad infinitum. But what I do want is, and please work through Ahmed, because I am accessible, whether it's in Etobicoke or whether it's here. We are planning, and I'm glad to know now, because I didn't know before that Brent was so involved in your community within his riding as well. We've had chats about trying to set up a Somali engagement day on the Hill. Time frame was to be somewhere around February, where you can talk to the ministers. Jason Kenney, you're going to talk to him tonight, but community leaders would be able to have a one-on-one. You could talk to the Foreign Affairs Minister, you could talk to Bev Oda and others, and start to formulate a greater strategy, not only internationally for things that affect Somalia, but also look a little more internally to things that affect your homes and your families here as well. Because not only does Somalia has to prosper, but you have to prosper as families here as Canadians too. And that's something that we as politicians, we as community leaders, we as activists in our own way, are more than happy to try to help you with. So please have that dialogue with us. We are accessible, and we want you to be able to come to us and talk. Ahmed has my number. He knows where to find me 24 hours a day. So by all means, please engage with us. Thank you.
If a public official is at least willing to engage and learn and listen, that's half of the battle. After that, you can work together and reach understandings on how to tackle issues of concern to our community. I'd like to welcome Mr. Kaleem Akhtar. He's the Executive Director of Human Concern International. Human Concern International collected a lot of money for the famine relief process, and they also worked with the community, engaged them, didn't just collect money on their behalf, but actually worked them and empowered them. And people like Jamal Hassan worked with Mr. Kaleem and others to raise a lot of money for Somali relief, famine relief. So welcome, Mr. Kaleem. Thank you. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As was introduced, I represent Human International. I have two other colleagues here. We have been working worldwide for the past 31 years. Our involvement in Somalia is more than 2 decades. First time I was in Somalia was 1991. We have been doing lots of projects. We are a community-based organization. We have worked very closely with all communities, and during this crisis, we have worked very closely with Somali community. And I must tell you that this city had been fabulous, and from this city alone, we had been able to raise more than $1 million. Our total to date has been $3.1 million in aid that we have raised in donations. And since July of this year, we have been able to direct over $1.6 million in aid to Somalia. And that was, in the beginning, we were providing lots of relief. And then we moved on to other projects. We have been building schools, health centers. We have provided ambulances. The recent package that we have sent there is a medical aid package, which is worth about $1 million. We will continue our work. We will be there for a long haul. We would like to do more sustainable projects. The issue here is that now that we have raised funds and we have been using them, we would like to get the funds. We know that the government has met the funds, but we would like to have access to those funds so that we can multiply our donation and do much more and many more projects. So we need help from the community, and we need help from the leaders who are gathering here today. We have a good track record. We are highly reliable, highly respected organizations. The 31-year track record in itself tells a lot. We have many friends in the community, in the Somali community, and it's not only Ottawa that was so forthcoming in helping us in raising funds. There were other cities, youth especially from Somali community, were very helpful, very upfront, and they worked very, very hard in helping us to raise funds. I can go on. There is a history of 31 years, but very briefly, we have a budget of about 10 million a year, and we are working in 41 countries, and we have at this time over 185 projects worldwide. Thank you very much. I'm here from Mr. Brent Radgerber, MP, Edmonton, St. Albert. I've met Brent in Alberta through Mohammed Accord's work, and Brent has worked with us on criminal justice issues that gripped Alberta for the last number of years, but actually originated from Toronto. A lot of the young people in Alberta who were dying dropped out of school in Ontario as a result of the Mike Harris's Zero Tolerance program, which was eliminated recently. So Brent has been open-minded and accessible to us, and really helped us address some of the issues around social justice issues and court issues and legal issues. And thank you very much, and we hope to work with you.
Well, thank you, and it's really an honor for me to say just a couple of words from my perspective as the Member of Parliament for Edmonton, St. Albert. It wasn't long after my election in 2008 that I met Mohammed Accord, who's here and present, and he is the Executive Director of the Alberta Somalia Community Centre, which is in the Edmonton-St. Albert riding, and in fact not more than about 10 blocks from my house. And the Somali community in Edmonton is not as large as in Ontario, or certainly not in Etobicoke or in GTA. But as you know, they face some unique problems with respect to gang activity, and a number of young male victims were victims of homicide, many of which remain unsolved to this day. So I got involved with Mohammed and the Alberta Community Centre for Somalians in 2008, shortly after my election. We've had a number of very, very proactive and constructive meetings dealing with everything from immigration and citizenship to policing and interaction and involvement with the non-Somali community in Edmonton. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is when the Justice Committee, which I sit on, was touring a little over a year and a half ago with respect to a study in organized crime. Mohammed Court came and did a presentation to the Justice Committee in Edmonton when we were traveling, and it was very well received. And that report will actually be released in the new year, and there will be some references to your presentation, Mohammed. So the problems continue. I think there's been some mild or some slight resolution of some of them.
So half of the appreciation will begin now. We'll hear from Deputy Chief of Mission, Mr. Serdar Belentep, and I'm told that's the perfect pronunciation. So, Mr. Belentep will talk about what Turkey has done for the victims of the famine in Somalia, but not only that, by providing relief, but also long-term things that will empower the Somali people and enable them to stand up on their own 2 feet, like providing scholarships and building economic infrastructure. Welcome.
Distinguished members of Canadian Parliament, distinguished members of the Canadian Somali Congress, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Canadian Somali Congress and Mr. President Ahmed Hussein for the very kind invitation and the opportunity to be here today. It's indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to address such a distinguished audience. I'm very happy to be here and come together with the Canadian Somali community. On behalf of Mr. Rafet Akgünay, Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey, I would like to salute all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, Somali, with which our close and unique relations date back to Ottoman times, is going through a humanitarian catastrophe. Man, woman, and children, young and old, are all in urgent need of aid. What's going on in Somalia is a result of 20 years of civil war and chaos. Turkey believes that the Somali people should not be enduring such a tragedy, and the international community should help Somalia to get rid of all the troubles she has been facing for a long time. In order to prevent the recurrence of similar humanitarian tragedies, Turkey attaches great importance to the establishment of peace and stability in Somalia. To this end, Turkey envisages promoting awareness raising, extending humanitarian assistance, and carrying out development and infrastructure projects. In this context, Turkey hosted the Ministerial Emergency Meeting of the Executive Committee of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on Somali in Istanbul on August 17. By organizing this meeting, Turkey hoped to draw attention and a special focus to the most vulnerable segments of the population and the refugees who have been subjected to the combined effects of displacement, drought, and famine. The trip of our Prime Minister, His Excellency Erdogan, who was accompanied by his family to Somali on August 19, was a milestone in drawing the world's attention to this crisis. In fact, during the past 20 years, no high-level visits to Somali had been realized by any Western countries. Turkey's aim was to break the psychological barrier before the international community concerning Somali. We are happy to see that the international community has been getting more involved in Somali after this trip, and that there is visible progress in the overall efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, as a further show of support, Turkey opened an embassy in Mogadishu on November 1st. The Turkish embassy will be a point of contact in Mogadishu for Western countries and international organizations which don't have any permanent representations in Somalia. Moreover, Turkish Airlines plans to launch direct flights between Istanbul and Mogadishu in the months to come. Turkey commenced a huge national campaign to help the Somalis affected by the drought and famine. Until now, Turkey succeeded to collect almost $300 million. Turkey has already sent 11 airplanes and 8 ships carrying 17,000 tons of humanitarian assistance materials consisting of food, medical supplies, and 4 mobile field hospitals to Somali. The refugee camp built by the Turkish Red Crescent in Mogadishu is already hosting thousands of Somalis. Turkey has started preliminary work in order to rebuild Dikfar Hospital in Mogadishu, asphalt the road between the Mogadishu airport and city center, and repair the National Assembly and government buildings. We are committed to implementing these development projects in close cooperation with the Somalis and international community. We hope that all these efforts being conducted by Turkey will be the first step towards integrating the people of Somalia with the rest of the world. Distinguished guests, before I conclude my remarks, I would like to express one more time my thanks to the Canadian Somali Congress for organizing this event. Thank you very much.
We want to hear next from a few remarks from Fawzia Abdelkader. She's a prominent community member in Ottawa, and she'll speak to the connection between human rights and famine in Somalia.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank Ahmed actually and the Canadian Somali Congress for organizing this, and also thank the Ottawa community, Somali community. Particularly what Ahmed asked me to highlight is we all know, I think, the connection between famine or the results of the last 20 years in Somalia and the plight of the people when it comes to human rights. I'm a social justice activist and a human rights activist, and it was just heartbreaking to see the plight particularly women and children were in. So it's really great to see the Canadian government's efforts that as soon as the famine was declared, that they announced that they will match whatever funds that were raised. What was also amazing and really moving was the role that the Turkish government has taken in as far as even everybody who hears Mogadishu is being listed as the least safe place to be or the scariest place to be. So to have seen the Prime Minister and his wife go to Mogadishu was really something that has brought attention and light to the fact that Somalis are resilient people. Somalis have been dealt their fair share of difficulty, and they still manage to do business, to live, to build universities. So what is missing is that political situation to settle. Thank you very much.
I want to start by just bringing the Minister up to speed on the importance that this event has for the Canadian Somali community. In our culture, when anyone does anything for you, you have a very high obligation to express your gratitude, to make sure that you express your gratitude sincerely and thank them for whatever good that they do for you. So we're here to thank Canada for being the first major Western country to respond to the famine in East Africa and Somalia, and to send a cabinet-level minister to the region. You know that one of the main goals of this evening is to not just talk about the famine, but to talk about the resilience of the Somali people, both in Somalia and in Canada, and to also mention a few things about how Canadians of Somali background have been able to add to the rich diversity of this country as law-abiding and hard-working citizens. Somalis first came to Canada in the late 1980s, and again, speaking of gratitude, Canada opened its doors to the Somali community in their most vulnerable time, at the time of dislocation and civil strife. The result of that generosity by Canada under the government of Brian Mulroney at the time, and subsequent governments, has resulted in integration of these communities into major urban centers of Canada. For example, in Toronto, hundreds of businesses and jobs have been created by Somali Canadians, and in other cities as well. I want to first highlight the fact that, for example, in the city of Edmonton, there's a major street called 118 Avenue that cuts Edmonton into northern and southern sectors. That street was basically written off by everyone else until Canadians of Somali background moved from Ontario to Alberta seeking opportunity, and took a chance on that avenue by opening businesses and pushing away drug dealers and other characters. What has resulted is in a renewal of 118 Avenue, to the extent now that even the Alberta government is proud of 118 Avenue and has renamed it Alberta Avenue as a result of the entrepreneurial and hardworking efforts of Somali Canadians. Of course, there are a few of our community that have not been able to integrate as successfully as most of us, that have fallen into the lure of gangs and extremist groups. But for the most part, we are law-abiding and hardworking, and we have a tradition of strong family ethics that has served us well in this country, our new home, Canada. I have personally traveled across the country. Minister, the last time you saw me, I had just come back from Alberta for the second trip at the time, and I was working with, at the time, Attorney General Alison Redford, who's now the Premier of Alberta, on policy contributions from our community with respect to strengthening witness protections in cases, difficult cases of gang affiliation. There was federal protections, but there was no provincial protection. So we were able to have policy input with the assistance of people like Mr. Brent Ratgerber, who worked with us. He sat in the Justice Committee at the time. And those submissions are now actually part of a report that's coming out in January. In places like Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie, and Brooks and Medicine Hat and Calgary, we've seen amazing work done by young Canadians of Somali background who are giving back to their community and are doing that as Canadians who are also proud of their heritage. We love Canada because Canadian citizenship is based on shared values. It's not based on ethnicity or national origin. So those values are values that are consistent with our values. They are the respect for minorities, respect for human rights, democracy. I want to welcome now Minister Jason Kenney. He's here with us, and I want to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule. Thank you. Please welcome Minister Jason.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for your kind introduction and your great words. Your Excellency, parliamentary colleagues, Brett Rathgerber and Ted Opitz from St. Albert, Alberta, and Etobicoke Centre, Ontario, respectively. I was also, by the way, I'm just speaking with this afternoon with my friend and colleague John Baird, Member of Parliament for Ottawa West Nepean and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He wished he could have attended tonight. He has other engagements, but he wanted me to pass on his his best regards to the Canadian Somali Congress and all members of Ottawa's Somali community in particular. And it's good as well to see my old friend Ed Morgan here. I should say my friend, Ed is not old, but he's been a friend of mine for a long time. And to see Mohammed from the Alberta Somali Community Center. Friends, it's a real honor to be with you. I changed my schedule just so I could be here tonight. As Ahmed has said, I've always tried to be a supporter of the great initiatives of the Canadian Somali Congress. Because it gives a voice, a very practical voice, to a community that has had unique challenges in Canada. And I see in the efforts of the Canadian Somali Congress and particularly its young cadre of leaders, a really tremendous sign of hope, a positive direction focused on Canada, on integration, on helping the community in practical ways to get through the challenges of integration. And so for every sad or tragic story we read about emanating from some of the young people in the Somali community, we have people like Ahmed and so many of his peers who whose lived experience in Canada, one of opportunity, of success, of hard work, of education, of devotion to family, and giving back both to the Somali community and the greater Canadian society. And so I meant to you and all the members of the executive, all the volunteers, all of those who continue to do this important work, thank you on behalf of the Government of Canada. This really is so important. You know, I know that the history of the Canadian Somali community is one of people who came through the trauma of war, conflict, violence, some through persecution, and who came to Canada with starting in the late 1980s, typically with very little, without a head start. People who arrived without a pre-existing community network to help them settle. People who arrived often with limited levels of formal education or language proficiency in English or French. People who were carrying the baggage and the burden of the trauma, the violence, the emotional scars that they lived through during the Civil War in the 1980s and early 1990s. People who brought with them the burden of clan divisions and a different culture that didn't obviously fit in directly into modern Canadian society. Yet people who stuck it out, who decided that this was their new home and that they were going to make a positive contribution to Canadian society. And we see that now with the huge growth of the Somali community in my home province of Alberta. As Ahmed mentioned, in Fort McMurray, and where I've met hardworking young Canadians of Somali origin, in Brooks, where I've met amazing people doing tremendous work with a very, very positive approach to both the labor market and to social integration. To people in my own home city of Calgary, some of the leaders of one of the largest and most successful immigration settlement organizations in the country is the Calgary Catholic Immigrant Services Society, and some of the key leaders, coaches, teachers, and executives in that large, important organization are of Somali origin, as well as through the services they provide in Brooks, for example. And you know, we see the emergence of the 1.5 generation who arrived in Canada as children, and indeed the second generation who have benefited from Canadian education and society. We could just think about the proud young Canadian of Somali origin, Kanan, who is a world recording artist, to young Canadians of Somali origin who are now in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and in our armed services, who are going into the public service, who are successful entrepreneurs. These are all remarkable signs of hope. And one of the things I find most encouraging is to see how other communities that you just underscored this moment have reached out to and worked with the community. So many members of Canada's Jewish community, members of the Ukrainian community. I know, you know, that the remarkable thing that we're celebrating tonight was the generosity of Canadians in responding to the famine crisis in East Africa. And that generosity was fueled in large part by individuals, by families, by civil society, by individual groups. Like, for example, the Ukrainian community you just mentioned. Ukrainians went through a huge planned famine, a state-organized famine that killed several million people in 1933, and this is a scar on the psyche of all people of Ukrainian origin to this day, in a way that, in some respects, the Holocaust is for the Jewish community. And the Ukrainian community, therefore, responded to the tragedy of the East African famine by raising, I think, just in Toronto alone, over $100,000. So this, I just want to convey to members of Canada's Somali community that you have a lot of allies, a lot of people standing in solidarity, rooting for the success of Canadians of Somali origin, and eager to help pave the way to that success. You know, I often point out when I'm speaking to you know, we've talked about some of the challenges. I know my colleague Ted Opitz did, and you've alluded to some of the challenges the community has faced, Ahmed, and you've approached those in such a constructive way. You know, rather than taking a combative approach towards police and dealing with some of the youth crime issues, you've taken a constructive approach, working with the law enforcement authorities, working with the relevant ministries of justice, trying to get relationships of trust and communication going back and forth so that the police can protect the community from people who would do violence, and the community can help the police do their job. And that's just so important. Similarly, we have some in the community have been, some young people have been seduced by extreme ideas coming from those who would distort the Islamic faith of some young Canadians of Somali origin, distorted into an ideology not of peace, but not a religion of peace, but indeed to an ideology of violence. And we know that it's so important to send a message to young Canadians of the Muslim faith that there is no reason to go down that path. And I often say to young Canadian Muslims that it is true that in our society that young Canadian Muslims may face extra barriers, extra burdens, extra hurdles, they may face occasional prejudice or misunderstanding or negative stereotypes. All of those things are true. But none of them can or should be an excuse to opt out of Canadian society, to regard Canada as an enemy. Any such obstacles or prejudices are just an extra reason to overcome them, and to teach others about the truest Canadian values, about mutual respect and religious freedom. And this is so critically important when I speak to young Canadian Muslims who may feel aggrieved or may feel that sometimes they're locked out of opportunity in our society. I point out that there are others who have overcome all of those things. You know, the CEO of the largest telecommunications company in Canada today, a multi-billion-dollar global company, Rogers Communications, is named Nadir Mohammed. And he arrived in Canada as a young Muslim refugee from East Africa, when there were a lot fewer Canadians of East African origin or the Islamic faith, where there was a lot more misunderstanding, perhaps a lot more prejudice. And he and his generation that arrived with him overcame that. And they focused on what was possible. They focused on education. They focused on opportunity. And by the way, Nadir Mohammed just bought the Toronto Maple Leafs yesterday. So I don't know how you get more Canadian than that. Maybe you should have bought a team that actually wins, but but that's the message. That's the message that I believe the Canadian Somali Congress is conveying to young people. And I just again applaud the Congress for its leadership in that. Now we're here to celebrate Canada's response to the great human tragedy of the famine, and we're truly remarkable. You know, I think altogether, if you include all of the contributions made by the Government of Canada, plus the matching contributions made by individual citizens, plus the contributions made by NGOs, that the total is in the neighborhood of $200 million, which is the highest per capita contribution to East African famine relief in the world. Canada was more generous than any other country. And that speaks truly to the generosity of the Canadian people. And I know that my colleague, the Honourable Bev Oda, was honored to lead that effort on behalf of the Government of Canada and Canadians through the Canadian International Development Agency. She was deeply moved to visit the region and get a concrete understanding, to work with the World Food Organization and all the relevant international agencies and NGOs in responding to the emergency. And we have tried to express in practical ways our solidarity for the poor, the people of Somalia who have been the victims of such terrible leadership for so long. We have tried to join the International Contact Group so that we can play a supporting and constructive role in trying to create political stability in Somalia. We've dispatched Canadian military assets, frigates, to the region for several months at a time to help police the waters adjacent to Somalia in East Africa, to keep pirates from preventing food shipments from arriving inshore. And, you know, when we look at what has happened, we recognize that this famine was in large measure made enormously worse by extremists and people with a political agenda who actually seemed to want victims to point to, who did everything they could to interrupt the delivery of international humanitarian aid. And so all of us, regardless of our background, I think joined together as human beings in denouncing those who would dare to stand in the way of the delivery of humanitarian emergency aid to the people of Somalia in one of their hours of greatest need. And so let me say, both diplomatically, through our aid development projects, practically, we are doing everything we can to support, within our Canada's means, to support the people of Somalia and others in East Africa during these difficult times. And we do hope that someday, sanity will return, and that those who would seek to divide and play on clan divisions and play on religious passions and play on a history of grievance and violence will put down their guns and allow the international community to assist the Somali people in all their diversity to restore a stable and peaceful society. And that's a dream that we all share. I know that you do it in many practical ways. Many of you, your families make big sacrifices to send remittances back to relatives, maybe living in refugee camps in neighboring countries or in Somalia itself. And we acknowledge that you are helping to, frankly, this community is helping to keep people alive, literally, with the hard work that you do here and the support that you send back to Somalia. So again, I'm very proud of this initiative. I'm a member of a Conservative government. It was a Conservative government of Prime Minister Mulroney, without being partisan here, that opened the doors of Canada to Somali refugees in 1988 and accepted tens of thousands. And I'm delighted to belong to the government of Prime Minister Harper that has responded with such generosity, supported by the Canadian people and in keeping with our country's best values. So thank you very much, Ahmed, to you and the Congress, and we wish you every continued success in your important work on behalf of Canada and especially on behalf of Canadians of Somali origin. Thank you very much.
I want to take this opportunity now to, since Minister Kenny is representing the Government of Canada, he will officially receive the Certificate of Appreciation and a very sincere gratitude on behalf of the Canadian Somali community. I thank the Minister for one major thing. Whenever he addresses us as Canadians of Somali background. We are heartened by that the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration sees us as that, and it's an important symbol and signal to the rest of Canada to consider us Canadians, and it starts, charity begins at home. So I want to take this opportunity to present the Minister with a Certificate of Appreciation. reads, on behalf of Canadian Somalis everywhere, we thank the Government of Canada for its generosity to the victims of the 2011 famine in Somalia. Thank you.
Sir, can I get you to look right here? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.